Hello everyone, my name is George and this is my first Power BI video tutorial for Power BI. What we're going to talk about today is how to apply conditional formatting to your line charts, which is a very tricky for some way to do it, but it can be very useful. I use it all the time to the reports I'm creating for my clients, and I find it very useful where at a glance I want to see if there is a positive or negative trend. Of course, you can use it in any way you like, but what we will discuss today is how we can change the color of a line if, for example, the traffic of a site goes down or up, right? When we compare it with previous periods. So let's see how actually this works and why it's a great way to do this. By default, Power BI doesn't provide us this functionality, right? It doesn't allow us to apply conditional formatting on line charts, so we can need to be a bit creative and with a bit of knowledge of DAX, we can create something bespoke for us to work, right? So here we have a line graph, which displays the traffic of a site from the March 15, 2018 up to today. And I have set the default color for the line graph to be gray. So what happens now is I have a slicer up here with four options, 7, 30, 60 and 90 days. So when I will select one of those options, what will happen is that the measures that I created is that they will calculate the sum of past n days and the sum of previous n days, and it will make the comparison, and if the past n days is greater than previous n days, then it will display a green line, but if it's the other way around, if its past days is less than previous days, then it will display a red line. So at a glance I can see if, for example, my site performed well compared to the previous period or worse. So let's click on 7 days. So the moment I click on 7 days, you will see that the line of the chart changes to red, and this indicates that there is a negative trend for my site when I compare those two periods, past 7 days with the previous 7 days. But when I select 30 days, you will see that the graph turns to green because this indicates that there is a positive trend, and this shows that for the past 30 days, the sessions that my site received were more compared to the previous 30 days. And this is actually what it does, this is how it works. And you can have as many periods here to compare as you like, but for now and the purpose of this tutorial we'll use those four, 7, 30, 60 and 90 days. So what do we need in order to build this, right? How we can create this from scratch? There are a couple of things that you need to have available within Power BI before we start creating any measures. The first thing is that you need to have your data table, anything that includes the sessions or, for example, sales or whatever this may be. But because we want to have a time series format, we also need to have a column within our dataset that is called date, and it has all the dates available for the period that we want to display the data for. So for my case, for example, I have this table that I call data, and you can see I have my date and site ID. This can be the case, you don't really have to have it, but also have my sessions here. So the other thing I really need is another extra table that will include the periods that I want to use for my slicer and make the comparisons accordingly, right? So we need to create a table that includes two columns, ID and period, and we can call this table compare. So how we can create this table? So of course you know more or less if you are doing Power BI, you can build this with an Excel sheet or a Google sheet and then import it, but we can do this within Power BI as well, right? So let's build one really quickly. So we click under data, the window appears. On my first column I want to have the column named ID. There are a number of reasons why we need to have this. First of all, I like all my tables to have a column ID and have numbers, integers that increase incrementally from 1 to whatever this may be, for this case 4, because it allows us, for example, if the second column has text values instead of numbers, we can use this column in order to change the order, either ascending or descending, right? So let's start building our first column. So we have 4 rows. I need to put 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I have also 4 periods, and I will name this column period. And I have here 7 days, 30 days, 60 days, and let me check this typo, and 90 days. So once I have my columns ready, then I can name this table, for example, X compare. If you put an X in front of the name of the column, then by default it will put it at the bottom of all the tables, underneath all the tables that you have available. Let's click load, and now you will see that it will appear once it loads here, and it's exactly the same as we have over here, right? And I have prepared my compare table that includes the ID and the period that we want to select. This table and the values of the period column will be used for my slicer, as I have over here. So let's leave this for now. The second thing that we need to do is now we need to create 4 columns for my data table over here, and each one of those columns will mark within my data the dates that belong to the periods that I want to compare. So I need to have one column for the past n days and one column for the previous n days times 4, because we have 4 periods here. So if we go back to preview the data available within this table, you will see I have those 8 columns over here, one for past 7 days, previous 7 days, same thing for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and previous 30 days, 60 and 90 days. So what I'm doing is here I'm marking the dates if they belong to the range of the past 7 days. So you will see, for example, from the 21st of November, I mark with yes up to the 14th of November, which is the 7 days based on the maximum data I have within my dataset. And then for the previous 7 days, I do exactly the same, but I change a bit the order, where I say, for example, start from the 8th day from the maximum date, which is the 13th of November, and go all the way down to the 14th day from a maximum date, and mark this as yes because are my previous 7 days. And I do exactly the same for the past 30 days, 60, 90, and so on and so forth. So let's see how we can create those. We need to create custom columns. So to create a custom column, you right click on your data table, you select new column, right? So here what I need to do, I have those columns ready, but let's start this and build this together from scratch. I will call this, for example, past 7 days, and I put number 2 here because I have it already, so we can use the name only once. And now what I need to do here is to start with an if statement, right? So if from my data table the column date is less or equal to the max date from my table data, but also at the same time, if date from my data table, oh, sorry, from my data table is greater or equal to the max date this time, minus 7, because I want to go 7 days back from a maximum date, then display yes in the row, or if this is not the case, display no. And this is exactly my measure. So I click, I save, and now I have it as a column within my data table. So we'll do exactly the same thing for the past 30 days, 60 and 90, just by changing the value here from 7 to 30, 60 or 90 for each one of the columns that will return yes for all the rows that are included with this time period. And as you can see here, I have my dates, my past end dates for those 4 periods ready over here. So I have my past 7 days as the one we created, past 30 days, 60 days, and also we have the 90 days. So now we have to do exactly the same, but now for the previous end days, right? From the previous periods. So the formula more or less remains the same, but this time what we're doing is we're starting with, again, with a if statement, but this time we need to say that the date is less or equal to the max date minus 8, because now we want to start a range from the 8th day from the maximum date, because we don't want to use the 7th. If we use 7 for both, then this means that we will use the 7th day for both measures, which is actually overlaps. We don't want to do that. So we always start from a day before that, in this case 8. And now we do exactly the same as we did before, where we specify the range to go up to minus 14 days from the maximum date, so we can have a full 7 days. Once we do that, then we say mark them as yes, or if it's not the case, no. The same thing for the previous 30 days. But this time we start from the minus 31st date all the way down to 60, from the 60 days from the 61st day all the way down to the 120th day, and for the previous 90 days we go from the minus 91st day all the way down to the 180th day. So, and this is how we create the columns in order to specify the ranges and the dates where they belong to, right? Of course, there are other ways to do this, but this is one simple way that I like to use. And because I'm using these periods across many different reports, I like to follow more or less the same format. Now, what we need to do is we need to create two additional measures. One that will calculate the positive trend, and one that will calculate the negative trend. Those two measures, the reason why we need two measures is because we want to display a line if only there is a positive trend and another line if there is a negative trend. And we don't want those two conditions to all be true, right? Only one or the other. So to create the positive trend, we create a new measure, we name it positive trend, and we start with defining a variable that we call selected period. What this variable does, it goes and checks what is the selected value of the x compare table, or this case, for example, compare because I had it already, but let's name it x compare, and we always check the ID, right? And we want to use this value, we want to store this value within the variable selected period because we want to use it further down. So the next thing that we need to do is to create another variable, that's this time we will call it past days. And here we will have a series of if statements, so a nest of ifs. And what will happen is that we will calculate the sum of sessions and we will filter it when the past 7 days equals yes. So it will only calculate the sum of sessions for the days that have been marked for yes, and for this case only for the past 7 days. And now we say that if selected period is equal to 1, which is the ID 1 for the compared period 7 days, then calculate the sum for all the days that have under the past 7 days column they have been marked as yes. And the same thing for the second, the ID number 2, number 3, and number 4, in order to specify this for the past 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. So once we complete our past days variable, we need to do exactly the same thing, but this time for the previous days. So we can copy and paste exactly the same variable, but the only thing that we need to change here is we need to go and get the yes values for the previous 7 days table, previous 30 days table, so on and so forth. And again, if the selected period equals ID 1, calculate the sum for the previous 7 days, if it's 2 for the previous 30 days, and so on and so forth. The last thing now that we need to do is to create a condition variable where here we will specify the conditions and what needs to be displayed. So we will use a switch function here. We could of course use a switch function here as well, but for the sake of this tutorial we want to use both in order to see how this can work. So we use a switch function and we set it to true. So in order for this switch to work, one of those two conditions have to be always true. So what happens now is we're comparing the past days, which is the variable that we defined up here, no matter what the selection is, and we get the sum of the sessions. And we say if the past days is greater than previous days, then return the sum of sessions. But if past days is less than previous days, then do nothing, return blank, don't display anything. And because we're using variables, the last thing that we need to do is to use the return and specify the last variable that handles the conditions, which is the variable conditions. So once we have done that, we can copy and paste this measure, create a new one that we will call negative trend, which is exactly the same thing, nothing changes apart from the last thing, which is the conditions, where here we need to change the logic, right? So we need to say if past days is less than previous days, then display the sum sessions, because here this indicates that there is a negative trend. But if past days greater than previous days, then do nothing in this case, right? As we said earlier, we only want one of those two measures to work based on the selection we have, based if there is a positive or negative trend. So now what happens is we created those two measures, the negative and positive trend. We have to go back to our chart, and now we need to add those two under the value section over here. So we drag and drop, the positive trend and the negative trend, and let's change the order a bit because I want the default, if nothing is selected, to be at the bottom, right? So now if I select 7 days, you will see that the red line is displayed because there is a negative trend when I compare the past 7 days with the previous 7 days. But if I select 30 days, you will see that there is a green line because the past 7 days is greater than the previous 30 days. So the last thing I need to do is to color format the lines. Here it's more or less automatically because I have done this already, but how you can do this, right? So you click the chart, you select your period, you go to the formatting options over here, select data colors, and now you can change the positive value to any color you like. If I switch back to 7 days, you will see that this turns to red. If I click my chart, I go back to formatting, data colors, I can change the negative trend to any color I like. But you will see that I don't have the positive here, so I cannot change the positive color over here. It has to be positive for the positive measure and option to be displayed here. So in case if you apply this to your data and there is a negative trade all the way for any selection or option that you select from the slicer, then what you need to do is to go back to your positive trend for a moment, change the logic so it's similar to the negative, so it gets displayed. And once you do that, you will see that both colors overlap. So I can go back to my formatting, select my chart, formatting, data colors. Now you will see that I have all three available because both measures display the same condition. Will display the line because they have exactly the same condition. I can change the colors to my liking, and then once I finish formatting the lines, I can go back to my positive trend, correct the logic so it can only be displayed if there is a positive trend, save, and now you will see that it will work and it will display the correct color if there is a positive or negative trend. And this is it, guys. It's simple as that, and this is how we can change the color of a line graph based on some simple conditions. So go, feel free to experiment, make it your own, see how you can use it within your reports. I hope you like this video. This is my first video tutorial. So if you like the content, please, I would really appreciate if you can like the video. And if you want to see more tips and if you want me to share more of my knowledge, I would really appreciate to subscribe because this will motivate you to do more and share more of videos in the future. And I hope you like the video, and I really hope that you will be able to share with me with your comments any ideas, the ways you used it, because it will be nice to see how you can take this and make it better, uh, if you will. So one last thing is I will post within the video description the published report so you can go and play and see how actually this works. But we will also have a file that I will also include in the description, a link for where you can go and download the Power BI file so you can have see exactly what's happened and copy and paste the measures to your report or experiment and try to do something better or improve it. So thank you again so much, and I hope I see you in the next one. Take care.